Do you know how bad the smell of a decomposing body can get? A family of 3 was brutally murdered. For 6 months, nobody knew. It wasn't until the stench of decay spread through the entire apartment complex that residents finally called the police. But that wasn't the part that terrified the neighbors most. Because during those 6 months, many residents had seen lights on inside the apartment late at night. As rumors spread, several families became so frightened that they temporarily moved out. But when police finally entered the apartment, they uncovered an even stranger mystery. At first, residents assumed the smell came from a dead animal somewhere in the building. No one paid much attention to it. But week after week, the odor grew stronger. Eventually, it became impossible to ignore. Residents began going door to door, trying to locate the source. In the end, everyone stopped outside apartment 5, on the 5th floor of building 6, the home of Robert Miller. The air outside the door felt almost suffocating. No matter how hard they knocked, nobody answered. Building management showed up and tried as well. Still nothing. That's when a neighbor known as Old Tom spoke up. Come to think of it, I haven't seen Robert downstairs in about 6 months, another neighbor nodded, but someone quickly disagreed. That's impossible. I saw their lights on just last month while walking my dog. Me too, their apartment lights come on all the time at night. The more people talked, the stranger it seemed. Eventually, they called the police. The moment the patrol car entered the complex, the smell hit them. Detective Harris immediately noticed it. He rolled down the window and took one breath. That's not a dead rat. Based on information from residents, officers discovered they could access the apartment through a neighboring balcony. Officer Ryan volunteered to go first. He climbed over the divider and carefully made his way across the narrow ledge. Then he smashed a balcony window and unlocked it from the inside. But the moment he looked in, he froze. Seconds later, he scrambled back out. He ripped off his mask and started vomiting. We need respirators. Now. Once officers entered the apartment in full protective gear, they realized Ryan hadn't been exaggerating. The place didn't feel like a home. It felt like a giant rotting coffin. The smell alone was overwhelming. In the kitchen lay the body of a woman in an advanced state of decomposition. She was face down on the floor. Most of her features had already broken down beyond recognition. Dark decomposition fluids had spread beneath her body and across the tiles. The master bedroom was even worse. A man's body lay collapsed beside the bed. One arm was stretched upward. His fingers were curled, as if he had been desperately reaching for something in his final moments. His sweater had been slashed open. The tissue beneath was badly decomposed. Dark brown bloodstains covered the sheets. In a smaller bedroom, a third body was found, curled up behind the door. Part of the body had dried and shriveled. Other areas remained swollen from decomposition. It looked as though he had tried to escape. But he died just feet from the exit. Even veteran detectives struggled to keep from gagging. The medical examiner stood silently in the living room. The floor, walls, and even the ceiling were covered in dried blood. Spatter marks, smears, drops. Together, they formed a horrifying picture of violence. Mixed among them were signs of dragging and footprints. Then something caught my eye. An old wall calendar. It was still open to October 24th, 2007. The medical examiner studied it for a moment. The decomposition matches that timeline. Soon afterward, neighbors identified the victims: Robert Miller, his wife, Susan Miller, and their son, Kevin Miller. But one neighbor immediately turned pale. "Officer, that's impossible." "Why?" "Because we've seen lights on in that apartment for months." Police launched a full investigation. Before long, they tracked down Kevin's co-worker, Jason Carter. When Jason learned the family had been dead for 6 months, he was stunned. "No way. I went looking for Kevin before Christmas." Jason said he clearly saw lights on in the apartment that night, but as soon as he reached the door, the lights suddenly went out. He knocked repeatedly. Nobody answered. Frustrated, he shut off the apartment's main breaker. The lights went dark, but no one came outside. Then about 15 minutes later, the lights came back on. Jason ran upstairs and pounded on the door again. Still no answer. When he pressed his ear against the door, he heard footsteps inside. Police later interviewed dozens of residents, and Jason wasn't the only one. Many people reported seeing lights inside the apartment. Others reported shadows moving behind the curtains. Because of those signs, everyone assumed the family was still alive. No one realized they had been dead the entire time. The medical examiner eventually confirmed the date of death. All 3 victims died on October 24th, 2007. Robert was strangled with an electrical cord and stabbed 6 times. Susan suffered 9 stab wounds and bled to death. Kevin was stabbed before being strangled with a similar cord. Investigators recovered multiple unidentified footprints from the scene. Evidence suggested at least 2 killers were involved, and they had come prepared. Aside from the footprints, almost no useful evidence remained. But one question still haunted investigators. 6 months after the murders, who was turning on the lights? Who was walking through the apartment? And who was casting those shadows behind the curtains? As the investigation continued, police discovered something even stranger. Some footprints had been left on top of dried blood. That meant someone had entered the apartment after the murders, not just once, multiple times. Timeline analysis suggested the visits occurred on different dates. In other words, someone had been repeatedly entering a home filled with 3 decomposing bodies. At first, detectives suspected the killers. After all, some criminals return to the scene. Some come back to see whether the crime has been discovered. Others return to destroy evidence. And some revisit the scene simply to relive the thrill. But forensic analysis revealed a new twist. One footprint belonged to a size 39 shoe, and it appeared at least 3 months after the murders. The other prints were size 43. The tread patterns didn't match. They belonged to different people. So who left the size 39 footprint? Why did they enter the apartment months after the murders? And was there someone else? Someone secretly coming and going from that apartment long after the killers were gone? The mystery kept getting bigger. After collecting the footprints, detectives started looking for the missing money. The Miller family had spent years saving money to help their son Kevin buy a house and get married. The living room and master bedroom had been completely torn apart, but not a single bank book or even a coin was found. Veteran detectives believed it was a home invasion robbery that turned into murder. Every drawer had been emptied. Clothes were scattered everywhere. One thing stood out. A brand new computer keyboard sat in the living room, but the computer and monitor were gone. Then a scream came from the child's bedroom. A young officer had found a body hidden inside a desk made from an old wooden trunk. It was the 4th body in the house. The medical examiner made a shocking discovery. The victim had not died with the Miller family. He died at least 3 months later. He had been strangled. His hyoid bone and throat structures were broken. He was in his 20s and very thin. The shoes on his feet matched the size 39 footprints found at the scene. And the knife in his hand was the same weapon used to kill the Miller family. Police believed he might have been involved in the murders and later killed by an accomplice during a dispute over the stolen money. A property manager recognized the victim's work uniform. It belonged to the same factory where Kevin worked. Police brought in Kevin's co-worker, Jason Carter. The moment Jason saw the body, he was stunned. The victim was Daniel Lee, one of Kevin's closest friends. Daniel had lost both parents and was raised by his uncle. He often ate meals with the Miller family. After Kevin disappeared, Daniel had even helped Jason search for him. Jason refused to believe Daniel was a killer. Investigators found that the Millers got along well with their neighbors. They had no known enemies. The doors and windows showed no signs of forced entry. That meant the killer had been let inside. Police began checking everyone in the neighborhood. Soon, a man named Travis Walker caught their attention. He lived downstairs from the Millers. He was addicted to gambling, owed money to loan sharks, and had a history of theft. Some neighbors even claimed he could copy keys. Police searched his apartment right away. Inside, they found several unidentified keys and a large amount of cash. But the investigation quickly ruled him out. The keys belonged to his brother-in-law's family. The cash had been stolen in an unrelated theft. His footprints didn't match the ones at the crime scene. Travis was a thief, but he wasn't the killer. The case hit another dead end. The task force went back through every clue. Eventually, they focused on the missing money again. They believed whoever took the bank book must have gone to the bank. After a massive review of records, detectives found a crucial transaction. The morning after the murders, a man used Robert Miller's ID and Kevin Miller's personal information and password to withdraw every dollar in the family's account. Police immediately examined the withdrawal slip. A clear thumbprint was recovered. As detectives prepared for a large-scale fingerprint sweep, an unexpected tip came in. A neighbor across the hall, Brian Cooper, had been drowning in debt. He had even pawned his car. But shortly after the murders, he suddenly paid off his debts, got his car back, and seemed to have money again. There was something else. When the smell of decomposition spread through the entire building, Brian claimed he couldn't smell anything because of sinus problems. Police immediately brought him in and took his fingerprints. It was a perfect match. Detectives then searched his apartment. Under his bed, they found 2 pairs of bloodstained shoes. The tread patterns matched the 2 key sets of footprints found at the crime scene. The evidence was overwhelming. Faced with the fingerprints and footprints, Brian confessed. He said he had been buried in debt for years. Collectors were pressuring him non-stop. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the Millers had saved a large amount of money for Kevin's future. The day before the murders, Robert Miller had told him to quit gambling and start saving for a family. Brian felt humiliated. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. The next day, he knocked on the Millers' door. He claimed he needed a business loan. Once he confirmed they really had a large amount of savings, he decided to kill them. When Robert wasn't looking, Brian slipped a wire around his neck and strangled him from behind. Then he stabbed him several times. After that, he stayed inside the house and waited. When Susan came home from grocery shopping, he dragged her into the kitchen and killed her. Later that day, Kevin came home from work. The moment he saw the blood, he froze. Before he could even call for help, Brian slit his throat. Afterward, Brian searched the house and found the bank book. He remembered Robert once saying that all their passwords were based on Kevin's birthday. The next morning, Brian went to the bank. He entered Kevin's birthday. It worked. He withdrew every dollar. Police then asked about the 4th body. Brian sat silent for a long time. Then he admitted that murder too. After the killings, he paid off his debts and got his car back. But before long, he gambled away all the money. Desperate again, he returned to the Miller house, looking for valuables. More than a month passed. No one discovered the bodies. His fear slowly disappeared. At first, he only entered late at night. Eventually, he was turning on the lights and searching the house shortly after dark. He found cash, jewelry, and other valuables. Over time, the house full of corpses became his personal treasure chest. Just before Christmas, he returned once more. This time, he planned to steal the new computer. That's when Daniel Lee showed up. Daniel believed Kevin was still alive. He had come to deliver money. The moment Brian learned Daniel was carrying cash, he saw another opportunity. He shoved Daniel inside. Then he wrapped his hands around his throat and squeezed until he stopped breathing. Afterward, he searched Daniel's pockets. Inside was $10,000 in cash. To mislead investigators, Brian placed the murder knife used on the Miller family into Daniel's hand. Then he hid the body inside the large wooden trunk in the child's bedroom. He hoped police would think Daniel was the real killer, but his carefully planned setup eventually fell apart. At the end of the interrogation, the lead investigator asked one final question. What if it hadn't been Daniel that day? What if it had been Jason? Brian sat quietly for a long time. Then he answered softly. The outcome would have been the same. The day I killed my first victim, there was no turning back.